open up my computer. It's the desk saver, and I have it there because I need to be reminded of that often. And what better time for a shift from fear to love than Christmas season? Reverend David spoke last week about the lights of Christmas, how it seems like the whole world lights up. That Christ candle is magnified and multiplied all over the place at Christmas. And I wonder if it is from those words of Jesus, "You are the light of the world." I want to look now, going from our eyes at Christmas time to our ears, having ears to hear, and what it is at Christmas time that shifts our perception from fear to love is Christmas carols. And that one that we just sang actually started out as a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And it was put to melody by a fellow named Culkin. I want to give you a little of the history of that poem to share with you how the love that we celebrate at Advent time, this third Sunday, can sometimes bring pain. That life abundant that Jesus talked about is not always filled with just pleasure or happiness. That the depth of life can cause us to rise up out of the pain. That divinity within us enables us. So we just sang the first two stanzas of that poem, "I Heard the Bells." That was written by Longfellow on Christmas Day of 1863. You know what was going on at that time? We were smack dab in the middle of the Civil War. Now, let me back up a little bit. Longfellow's first wife died in miscarriage, so he lost a wife and a child at the same time. He remarried, and Fanny gave him 6 children. One day she was sealing the locks of her children's hair in an envelope with sealing wax, and the wax dripped on her dress. She caught on fire, and Longfellow heard her screaming, and he went and tried to put the fire out with his own body. He was badly burned himself on his face, and he grew a long beard and kept that for the rest of his life. She died in that hellfire, literally, for Longfellow, because he wrote 18 years later that the despair that he felt still then caused him to see the seasons as changeless. There was nothing in that beauty of the changing seasons for him. He had a son by Fanny, 6 children altogether, and a son who snuck off to join the Civil War. The history books say that he snuck. So we know that Longfellow did not approve, although he was an abolitionist, an activist against slavery. But apparently that love of his son foreshadowed his love of country, because his son had to sneak off and was wounded. On December 1st, 1863, Longfellow got word that his son had been shot. A bullet entered his left shoulder and exited through his right, and that he was paralyzed. So on Christmas Day, 1863, Longfellow wrote the words that we sang. But let me share with you a third stanza that we don't sing. Then from each black accursed mouth, the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound the carols drowned of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It was as if an earthquake rent
the hearthstones of a continent, and made forlorn the households born of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Longfellow was a Christian. Is this the abundant life that Jesus promised us? Does it sound like the abundant life? Well, the divinity within you, which was in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, rose up. Let me share with you the last stanza he wrote. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men. So we see this man, this human, who endured a bit of suffering in his life, rising up to that Christ self within him. Christmas Day of 1863. Let me forward a bit. But first, looking at what Jesus calls us to, more than loving friends and family, which can be painful. Jesus in Matthew and Luke says, everyone, anyone, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, can love friends and family. You must love your enemies. Now, Jesus Christ, that seems a little bit too much to ask of us as mere humans. But Jesus did. And is it impossible? On Christmas Day of 1914, anybody know what's going on then? World War I. Thank you, Richard the historian. Thank you. And on the front lines of northern France and Belgium, the Allies were fighting the Germans. English and French soldiers were in the trenches about a football field away from the German soldiers on that side. And at some point on Christmas Day, the English started singing Christmas carols. And it was responded to by the Germans. And they went back and forth, singing, exchanging carols, until the English started singing, "O come all ye faithful." And the Germans sang. They recognized the melody, the tune, and they began singing in a different language. Same melody they recognized. And then out of the trenches rose up these little sprigs of green, snow-covered sprigs of green, like Christmas trees. And then the Germans, it's written by those who were there, that first the Germans rose up and started waving. And the English and the Allied troops thought maybe this was some ambush, some trick, until they realized they didn't have rifles. They were just standing, vulnerable, and waving. So the English and French came up and did the same. And they met in that space in between what's called no man's land. And they exchanged cigarettes and shook hands. And they buried. This was known as no man's land because there were bodies strewn. And they took the occasion to bury their comrades at that time. Love your enemies. Humans are capable of that. In the middle of war, that happened. Before I leave Christmas carols, one more. Those are true stories. Then there's the Grinch. You remember the Grinch? The Grinch who tried his best to steal Christmas. He stole all the trees and ornaments, all the toys, all the sugar plum fairies, everything he could get, he stole and took it up to Mount Crumpet. And he succeeded, he thought, until he heard the Who's down in Whoville singing Christmas carols. And he said, maybe Christmas is more than you can buy at a store. So, Christmas carols, a shift from fear to love, a miracle happens at Christmas time. Just a little more history. Metaphysically, Unity magazine in 1896 shared these words. Enemies are our own thoughts. The teachings of the gospel of Jesus Christ against enemies were about the foes within his own breast, enemies of the divine self, whose destruction spirit demands. The only great battles we have to fight are those within our own world of thought. For a man's foes are they of his own household. We have no other foes. Unity can be a hard theology to follow. The rewards are great, don't you think? And thank God we can take baby steps in things that Jesus calls us to, like loving our enemies. We can act as if. And then what happens is the rewards we feel are so great that we then want to have more, take another baby step, have more of that feeling of love in our life. We are capable of that. Christmas reminds us of that every year. The Christ in us, our hope of glory, reborn again. So, you know, Jude, I think I forgot to do the Our Father. And we did it, we did the Our Father. Okay, well, time flips when you're having fun, I guess. So maybe, I was going to say, maybe we do it again, but just remember that those carols, and we'll sing some more before it's over, those carols raise us up and let us go into a place ready and willing to be raised. And we do that by taking a few moments of prayer and meditation. So find that comfortable place in your seat